Ron, what do you call people who bother people at a landfill site? Cause trouble at a landfill site?
Yeah,
Oh, I did that.
Yeah, he did that.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to tonight's budget meeting for November 23rd, 2023. It's our third meeting for our 2024 budget. To any declaration of any interest. Councillor Nicol.
Just for the very last page and emergency services and fire.
Thank you very much. Anybody else? Okay, with that, have a motion to adopt the agenda.
Moved by Councillor Restool and seconded by Councillor Teissier. Be it resolved that the agenda for the council budget meeting held on November the 30th, 2023 be adopted as presented.
All those in favor? Carried. And with that, we will move on to the next and only item, which is our budget presentation. To start us off, I will hand the floor to our CAO, Mr. Bartlett.
Thank you, Your Worship. Would you like me to stand or stay seated?
As you please.
Pardon me?
As you please.
All right, I'm comfortable.
Okay, then I think we're.
So this is the third meeting of the budget. In the first meeting of the budget, we presented to you the overview and also the operational issues with respect to the operating portion of the budget. And then in the second meeting, we had a meeting to talk about what the capital requests were that correspond with this budget. And so at that point, council received that information and it was suggested that we meet again, of course, to digest what you've had and to have any questions. Between that time, I don't know if it's been a week or 2 weeks now because they tend to run on. Between that time, staff had a meeting, and it was decided, in all out full transparency, to reach out to councillors or to their chairs at least, and to re-explain their budgets if there were any questions or any other general questions. The majority, and some of you don't have, are not part of this budget. Sewer and water and garbage would be coming up in January. So at that point, there was a general discussion, and some of the takeaways I've got from the staff who got back to me were some of the general questions and comments. The first one, I would say, in speaking with Madam Mayor, who's the head of general government, was there was a discussion with respect to the reserves, and it would appear, after the last Thursday's meeting, that folks weren't very clear how that process works in budgeting with respect to reserves. So I would probably ask the question, because I think it's been clarified a few times with myself and others. Are anybody still having difficulty with the concept of reserve contributions and then what we're spending? Would you like me to go through it again? Yeah.
Moi, j'avais une question là-dessus.
Oui.
C'est sur la page 18.
Quel livre? Du budget workbook?
Oui.
OK.
Oui, c'est ça.
OK. Un instant, mais je sais pas si ça ne fonctionne pas. Bon.
Ending balance,
Oui,
qui serait dans les arbres, ça va être 3 900 000
c'est ça.
qui vont rester. Quand on commence, là, ça dit opening balance
Mhm.
de 4 400 000. Ça, c'est-tu inclus comme le pont Eugène
Non.
qui est terminé en réserve? Non, ça va pas là.
Non.
OK.
Alors, je peux l'expliquer en général, conseiller. Ça, c'est les réserves. So, these are the reserves for, ça s'appelle general reserves. Alors, ça, c'est comme that's your savings account pour n'importe quoi. And that is usually, I'll say it in English and then I'll translate it.
Oh.
That is usually surpluses or deficits from your operating, not your capital. The Pont Eugène is a capital expense, okay? So this is a general reserve and it's your general operating. So the level of general reserves are for non-contemplated type of things, or like how we use it to stabilize taxes, to get it down, or what have you. In terms of the police transition, we went into reserves to not borrow because we had the money. Now we're paying back reserves. So that's out of your operations, so your day-to-day operations. So what this says to you on page 18 is that this opening balance was as of January 1, 2023. This isn't what's projected. This is what was there. So there was 4,461,000 starting. What this council approved was that we were going to drop it from 1.5 to 1.2 million. Because in 2022, they used 1.5 and then we dropped it to 1.2, I believe. And so then that was reduced. But also the way I just indicated with the police, as you can see, the repayment from police transition, now that we're getting lower bills from the police, we're keeping the levels at the same as whether it was West Nipissing Police. But we're taking that to pay back what we took from the reserve when we did the transition. So there was a repayment. So it's $657,000 richer, but this council decided to use $1.2 million to stabilize the taxes. Okay. And then, so at that point, you end up having 3,918,630. Okay, so that's what was projected at the end of this year. So that was budgeted, and that's what we have. That's not a variance or anything. So right now, we have 3.918 in the reserve based on last year's decision. Then, and we have to project because we're early. The operating surplus this year is once again, and it's a coincidence, about 1.2. It could be 1.3, 1.1, but it's looking more like around 1.2, 1.3. So if you actually take the 3.9 and you add the 1.2, which is the surplus from 2023, you're pretty much back to where you're actually starting now. You're at about 5.1 million right now. Is what you have. Okay, so right now,
Which
yep.
can I find this, the 5.1 million?
You wouldn't because it hasn't been done yet.
Okay.
Yeah,
It's
but I'm telling you that you have a surplus of about 1.2 this year plus 3.9. Okay, so that's general reserves. Now your other,
Before we move on out of
Yeah.
general reserve, what's the comfortable rate that you'd like to have our general reserve at?
well, this is where I'm happy. So by the way, Ms. Craddock is not able to be here today. She's not well. And that works really well for me, so I can make the numbers up. That was a joke, jeez. Anyway, so Ms. Craddock is an accountant. I am not. But I play one on TV. My comfort level, I'll give you a straight answer. I've been here 23 years. Some of us have been here and there. And if you ask the government of Ontario, they, back in the day, they would say around 5 million to 5.5 million is a comfort level. You have to understand what the reserve is for. It's like a rainy day fund. We're using it to subsidize taxes. Let's say mid-year, we get the opportunity for a grant that some government decides to wake up and release some money, and we need to put our portion in. It wasn't budgeted in, we'll go into reserve, stuff like that. Heaven forbid, Giant Bridge collapses and we have to do it really fast. We'd have a rainy day fund and then borrow money and get it done. So, you know, so the higher, the more conservative. I will speak to a municipality that's pre-amalgamation to the east of us in Sudbury, where all of the mines were. They had reserves in the 100 millions. So I don't understand why that, because that's your money. That's taxpayers' money. So the higher your reserve is, that's great for the corporation, but you're also doing it based on big surpluses, and you're putting money in the bank at the expense of who's paying for that, right? So, and I tend to play a little more fast and loose. We've run our reserves down as low as $1.5 million to 2 million. But I also knew, and the environment was a little different then, I also knew that we could pull that off. I'm not comfortable with that. I don't have a problem with 3.9. So in your budget right now, so you have 3.9 and then a 1.2 surplus, but in the budget that we're proposing, and I'll get to a comment that Mr. Gagne, or Councilor Gagne, I apologize, said with his director, and I will provide you the information of what was cut and what wasn't. There was a differential, and I'll show you that. So I have no problem keeping the transfer surplus to operations at 1.2, including 3.9. Recognizing that in your budget, you also have the final police transfer of 212,000. So your 3.9 is going to go to 4.1. I have no problem in this day and age to have it at 4.1 because that, compared with all of our other challenges, you want to have a high reserve. Well, that's fine. At the expense of what? Either you raise taxes to get it there, or you cut costs or cut services. So I have no problem doing that. The other comment I'll make, and I know that we're sometimes monitored by upper levels of government, upper levels of government would want us to be very comfortable with having a lot of money. Then they don't have to, when we go cry poor at OGRA and Roma, they'll say, well, why do you need money? You've got some. So, you know, there's a fine line. And there's a reason why our taxes, despite what people think here, but our taxes on level are lower than others because we've been more aggressive with respect to keeping those numbers fast and loose. So we've been running 2.5. I think Mr. or Councilor Restoul would remember that. And 4 for my history is pretty healthy. I'd like to see it over 5, but over time, I'd also like to see the public works budget get to 9 million, because that's where your dedicated reserves, I really want to start getting those contributions up over time. This council's doing well getting there, but it'll be a couple councils before we actually get it to a healthy level.
Councilor Gagne?
Want to ask something first?
No, because you'll probably ask the question that I have, so you can.
So just to refresh my memory, how much are we taking from the general reserve this coming?
1.2.
1.2 million, okay, thank you.
So we have a surplus of 1.2, and you can say that you charge the taxpayers 1.2 million too much, and so we're giving it back to the taxpayers by lowering the taxes. If you want a sales pitch.
Thank you, no questions. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
So in this budget, this 1.2 goes
Right.
back into,
Yeah, and I will provide a presentation as
So
to
then
the
we wouldn't-
original 10.66%, because Councillor Gagne asked Ms. Hanning about, it would have been nice to see what you guys cut. Well, they didn't actually cut, I did, but because it was just the way this process happened this year. It was a little bit, we were really scrambling at the end. So I basically looked at a few things, but I will show you that. And originally in Elisa's figures, when it was at 10.66, she was planning on getting it down from 1.2 to 900,000. That was 300,000. And so that was part of the 10.66. I said, no, don't do that. First of all, because it's not a good year to do that, because that's about 1.5%. And B, let council do it. If they want to raise taxes to try and pay that down, let them decide. Even though we suggested it, I'd suggest not. So that was part of the 300 that I took from 10.66 to 5.3, and there's other things I'll explain to you. And we have a handout on that, but that's okay. Any other questions? I'm sure you have more questions on the dedicated reserve.
Yeah, we do. I'll just ask, so then, when we look at this page 18 and you have the ending balance of 5.1 million, then that would be your opening balance for 2024. We take the 1.2, same line, transfer surplus to operations, and the reserve we would end up with, or yeah, the reserve we would end up with would be that 5.1 minus 1.2 at 3.9.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yes, the 3.9, and not to add one to you or to confuse anything, but if you look into your police budget, you'll see a contribution to reserve of 212 there as well.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a payback.
Yeah.
And so that 3.9 will go up plus 212. So you'll get 4,130,000, more or less. That's going to be what you're starting next year.
Okay, so on general reserve, another question, Councillor Pellerin?
That same, I'm still not clear with it. The numbers there's numbers here, but then we're dropping all over the place. Me, I had figured out, okay, I see opening balance and then ending balance. In my head, we're technically taking about 2.7% equivalent of the tax base from the reserve. But it's not that,
Oh, more than that. Oh, way more than that.
way more than that,
Oh, yeah, 6%.
from the reserve.
So we are using 1.2 million. 1%, Councillor Pellerin, is 200,000. If it's 1.2 million, then that's 600, that's 6%. So we are buffering taxes using the reserve by 6%.
Other questions? Councillor St. Louis.
Okay, so, and for me, just to be clear, we are talking about the 1,200 or the 1.2 million, all this that you're mentioning, you're talking about the total of the 5.35 million, right? And that hasn't budged, that's 5.35.
Still 5.3,
Okay.
and that's assuming that you dip into reserves by 1.2.
That's okay.
So that was the easy one. The one that seemed to stick with people was the dedicated reserves, which are reserves for a specific purpose. Yes.
I'm sorry, I just still on the general reserve. I think when we talked at budget last year, there was a desire by this council to lessen
Yes.
the dependence on the reserve to offset the tax raises. Like we don't want to get into a position where every year we're using reserve. Like we're lucky this year because there was a surplus, which means that we're even. But if we want to get to the point where our reserves are stable, i.e. we really shouldn't be funding operations out of reserves, right? I thought that the plan was to kind of back that down every year. So 1.2 last year, and then this year we would try to get it to a 0.8 or a 0.9.
It was supposed to be 900.
Yeah. So so I just
So we backed out of that.
Yeah.
Because the needs that we came up with in terms of our dedicated reserves. So that's cash we have in the bank, and then we have a ton of other cash in the bank too that are dedicated reserves, and that's the reserves that people need to actually survive. And so Elisa and I basically said this year, given the financial strains that we have, we would love to get it to 900,000, but then if you would like to go from 5.3 to 6.7 or 6.8%, then you can do that, Madam Mayor. Or you cut services.
Thank you.
And that's why, and I apologize, but I also, have to kind of provide recommendations to council about what is the most fiscally prudent thing to do to manage the health at this time. And so to get it from 10.66, I made the decision with Elisa to say, let's drop the 300 and then let you decide at that point. But I'm going to be, and it sounds like an adversarial thing, staff against council. It really isn't. It's just the organization needs money to operate. You folks said what you want to do, which is generally status quo plus some enhancements, and we need money for it. And so that's the issue. So this isn't the time that we would do it. But when you're raising the taxes, let's say you end up raising the taxes 9%, just hypothetically. You got the joke. That's money next year. So if you're raising taxes 5% this year, let's say on that, that's $1 million. So then we're going to start looking at how is our situation next year. We're still going to want to raise our dedicated reserves because Public Works still needs to raise I think they're doing well on the fleet this year because they raised it about 450 or 435. But they, as you saw with Mr. St. Pierre from DM Wells, we're going to have to continue to get our dedicated reserves for roads and sidewalks and bridges and that up. Now, one of the things that, and this, I have pictures of a bunch of other councillors in newsprint because the mayor talked to me about what are other people doing. And I see a lot of sick faces on the papers of Ontario because it's happening all over. But one of the things that I can assure council is that is a deficit that you would want to do and raise yourself, except that it doesn't take into consideration perhaps future funding streams that the other levels of government provide. And so though you need to raise it to like 9 or 10 million, I don't think you do. I think that there's funding such as the fund that we got for the sewer and water project that's really redoing John and Ethel and everything. So there's always going to be stuff like that's going to help buffer. But regardless of that, we still have to raise those dedicated reserves. And that this year, and I'm jumping all over, but 3.3% of your 5.3% tax increase is raising the reserves. So 3.3, actually, it's a little bit more than that if you take the 200 to the general reserve, but it's around 3.3% of your 5.3% is strictly financing and paying off a level of expenditure. And those expenditures go into equipment and roads and buildings. Okay. The other 2% is uncontrollable levies from our agency partners. And that's, they represent 2% total. So your 5.3%, basically, if you take away the 2% that the DSAB, the health unit, the Chateau provide, and the 3.3% that your 600, and this is all in your packages, $635,000, I believe, is levy increases if you see a package. Well, 2% is 200 and 199, one kind of thing. So you can do the math, it's 3 point whatever. So all of our other operations basically did not increase. The other thing too is I'll remind you, and it's not a small thing. It's frustrating to me, and it should be frustrating to politicians too, is that when the government on the standard grant doesn't keep pace with our increasing pace, and in fact they take away, then that forces the taxpayer to make up that difference. And so if you take all of those things together, I think that, the budget that's being proposed for you has not been bad. Are there any questions though? Because I really want council going forward to understand the budgeting process of capital, which is the dedicated part. Does
So I just
everybody
want to make
understand
sure
that?
there's no more questions on the general reserve, and then we'll move on to just keep
Okay,
it
sure.
separate. So
Absolutely.
if anybody has any other questions on that page 18 that Councillor Pellerin pointed out for us. Thibault? Okay, any other questions on general reserve, and then we'll go on to a conversation about the dedicated reserves. Okay, thank you, Mr. Bubble.
Okay. I have, tried a variety of different ways of explaining it to a variety of different audiences. One, I was using my home expenses, which I deficit finance, so that's probably not a good idea. My father, who might be watching, hi Dad, this is an example of at your home kind of thing, where my dad never borrowed money to buy a car. My dad would take the trade-in value of the car, but he always put money aside from his income to on a monthly basis so that he'd have the money when he was ready to trade in to buy a car. That's kind of the same kind of capital budgeting that we're doing. So let's say I'm going to take Public Works for an example, and we're going to do their vehicles because it's more clear. You already got the rate or the St. Pierre thing, and that's, you know, the infrastructure deficit. It doesn't even take in bridges and everything. But if you take their vehicles, let's say they've got 6 dump trucks, 4 graders, 5 or 6 pickup trucks, a bunch of backhoes and whatever. And the total amount of that money in today's dollars to buy it was, say, $20 million. Okay. Then we also, by law in accounting, I think that Elisa talked about PSAB. We now basically depreciate our assets, right? And that's an accounting term. So basically, the average life, and this is just hypothetical, so you understand. So let's say all of those on average have to be replaced every 10 years. Okay, some might be 15, some might be 3, but on average of that money, it's 10 years. That means you need to have 20 million divided by 10 years, $2 million a year. So that would be a perfect scenario for the level of services that you're offering now, where you're not increasing too much maintenance in your operation because things are breaking down, but you're pushing them as far as they can go, and it's about 10 years, then you need $2 million. This hypothetically, and you have the exact numbers. So then let's say we're at 1.5 million right now. Then that's why they're going to want an increase of 500,000 so that they can be great. They asked for about, the Public Works asked for about $675,000 increase or something like that, and both in capital and equipment and in their infrastructure. I cut it back, and I'll explain that. I cut it back because you can't get to perfection in 1 year, nor will you be able to fund their infrastructure deficit. No municipality in the province of Ontario, even the ones that have good infrastructure, like, wouldn't you want to be the councillors for Vaughan, where you get 1,000 new homes made from a developer with no fixing of any roads or anything for the next 10, 15 years? What are they doing with their money, eh? But we don't have that luxury. So we're always going to have a deficit where our things are breaking down probably faster than we can fund them. And so that's where we're trying to be creative, and we're trying to get to a level over time. And so I reduced the dedicated reserves, and I'll go over them line by line with you. There's a document, but that's what we did. So basically, anytime you have an asset, so let's say Mr. Poulet has $160 million worth of buildings. So probably not that, maybe 80 million. And they're lasting 25 years or whatever. That's probably a bad example. He's got a study, but there's a certain amount that he needs to maintain those buildings every year. And there's an analysis that's done. And so let's say he's got 1.1 now, he should be at 1.9 is what the analysis says. And so that's what happens, is things start to get a little more and more tired. So we have to raise those levels. So that's how we do, that's what your dedicated reserves are. Now, how it's spent. So let's say this year you have $1 million a year, but you know you have to spend 2 million, but you only have $1 million. You should have $1 million in the bank, and then you can spend 2 million. And some years you still put $1 million in the bank. You spent that 2 million, so you got 0. But they're only going to spend 500,000 this year. But you took $1 million from the taxpayers. That 500,000 goes into the bank. Next year you get something. You still put $1 million in, and you have 1.5 million that you have to do. Well, you got the $1 million and the 500,000. So it stops councils from going. It used to be called pay as you go. Oh, we're heroes now. Now you have to raise taxes 25% because you can't afford the bridge. So it's a method of smoothing out your issues. So there's no peaks and valleys. It's a method of trying to find a stable budgeting amount. I'm sure Councillor Gagne would be the same way. He's probably got an infrastructure at the school board of computers and whatever of probably 20 million. And they last, there's, planned obsolescence with computers. They probably last, 3 years? And so he has to have a budget of X amount per year to satisfy all of his educational issues and all of his teaching, right? Otherwise, if he waits and waits and they just go as you go, how do you budget? So that's why it's a fixed budgeting thing. Is there any questions on that? Does that make sense to you? No, it's okay if you don't. It's important that you know that going forward. So what you're paying in your taxes does not relate to the capital you're paying directly. The two are not related.
Councillor Gagne.
What do we have as a starting point for dedicated reserve?
I don't have it in front of me.
It's like, because we didn't do the and don't, that's going back into dedicated, right, Mr. Barbo?
Changes by department. So dedicated reserves in, so $3.5 million is your annual contribution. That's not what's in the bank.
Okay.
So what we have in terms of your annual dedicated reserve payments.
Which bank are you looking at?
What document is that?
This was the one we received,
Is that single sheet?
Yeah,
Okay.
with the light blue. But that doesn't tell you what's in the bank. I don't know that Elisa has given you that yet,
Okay. No, that's okay.
but yeah, but that's what you contribute every year is 3.5 now. It's going to go to 4.1. So you're going to increase by $665,000.
For which department?
All of them.
All of them.
That's a roll up, one way.
Okay, so that's a difference.
So I can describe to you, si tu veux, let's say, so right now, community services had 869, they're flatlining on that. Fire had 100, this is in facilities, sorry, just facilities alone, corporate services. We reduced it from 165. In fleet and equipment, Public Works had 650. They're going to 1.1 because that's how things are so expensive now. Community services are increasing their fleet and equipment by 10. Fire are increasing by 180 because those fire trucks are starting to cost us. Corporate services, which is really computers and stuff, are increasing by 15. Now, in terms of infrastructure, this is where Public Works said, if you're going to cut me back like that, we really need to operate and fix and service our roads and sidewalks and whatever. So I'd rather you basically give us the money and let us get to the desired amount in your fleet so that we can continue, because if those trucks break down, we're not doing a run. And so a lot of people don't get served, right? And so they want to make sure that we can continue to serve the public. But in infrastructure, so they're only increasing in Public Works 25,000. Corporate services, change in reserve, their facility, again, Public Works, fleet and equipment. I mentioned that. Something's all weird here. Yeah. Fire is increasing by their fleet by 150. Yeah. And equipment. Hey?
those are the other sheets that she had.
Okay.
There.
Yeah, I didn't get that. Does that answer it doesn't answer your question, Councilor Gagne, with respect to the total amount, but we can get you that.
Well, that's okay. We can do the calculation.
Yeah.
It'd be around 3.5, going up by 6 feet.
It's going up by 635,000 or something.
Perfect, thank you. We did answer it. Thank you.
Thanks.
Any questions? So I'll just highlight again that what the staff is trying to.
Councilor Connery does have one.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Pellerin.
But just in the, oh, that's about
They want a page aussi, hein?
it. La page 35.
This is like a church song. Turn to page 35. I just have a sense of humor tonight. So. Okay. Page 35, I'm ready.
So that's what you're talking about.
So it was
End up with a surplus deficit of 149,000. That's what we're asking
So in the fire service, they have 495,000 per year that was budgeted for their reserve. This year, they're asking 675,000, so it will go up by 180,000 per year. Okay? The contribution from reserve, though, was be 895, but that's coming from the reserve. So that assumes that there's extra money in the bank account to pay for what he wants. So he's going to be spending 895,000. But you're only going to be paying 675 this year for it because he's dipping into his savings account. So if the number's lower than what you're contributing, it's going into a savings account. If the number's higher, then you're going into your savings account. Did you like that? Eventually, I'm going to change my wording so much that it's going to reach everyone. It's hard, and Elisa sees it a certain way, I see it a certain way, and then you folks see it a certain way. So it's hard. It's trying to get on the same page, but it's important and I could tell you that most organizations budget this way. Pay as you go is not a way you want to go because it'll kill. You'll be heroes one year, and then you'll be out of a job next.
Councillor Rivard?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So, thanks for all the examples. I wonder how many more we have. But, so, what I'm kind of understanding now is like the council's wish last year was to lower our dependence on general reserve. Then this year, even more dedicated reserve. So almost the only way I'd see it done would be if we would remove some from dedicated reserve to put towards the general reserve dependence, right?
And it would not be my recommendation because I think it's more important. I'm not as concerned. Trust me, I'm a siding salesman. Sorry about that. No, that's an old term. They're all good. But you have to understand that the biggest risk to the organization is in your dedicated reserves. Your financial risk and your liability on not performing for your public is in your dedicated reserves. Your general reserves, if I thought that there was a problem, I would tell you, and I'm telling you there isn't. It's not good, as the mayor is saying, it's not great, but right now, I wouldn't, that's not where I would go.
Okay, Councillor St. Louis?
Okay, so obviously last year I was the, call it what you will, the bad guy and brought it up and I'll do it again this year. So how do we go from 5.3 to lower if possible? I mean, last year we went from 7 and change and you did fantastic down to whatever it was, 3.9, 4.1, 4.2 or whatever it was. How do we do the same now? And I don't get me wrong, and I'm not looking at getting at 2 or 2.5 or not even a 3.5 or even around the 4 or 4.2. But how do we do that with your expertise, if you will, and I'll, try to butter you up somehow, without affecting whether it's the general reserve or the dedicated reserve. Now, I do understand, and I know that we do. It will affect it, and I get that. However, going through all the information that we were presented and all the stuff that we were given, I do understand that, when it comes to the fleet. So whether it's the loader that we require 100%, we're talking about stuff for the roads, whether it's the fire truck, I get that. However, for me, and I mean, that's just my thought process, we purchased a truck last year for Public Works and we're asking for another truck for Public Works. We purchased a truck last year for community service. We're asking for another SUV for community service. We're looking at and I'm just looking at every division that we looked at. So we're looking at the fire department and we're looking at a aluminum boat with a motor. I'm not saying that we don't need it, any of those. However, what I'm getting at or what I'm trying to figure out or understand are those the way that we would look at trying to knock it from 5.3 to 4.2-ish or whatever. That's basically, so, and sorry, Mr. Barbeau, like I'm saying, I know I might be that guy that will.
I know you're that guy.
I know, but maybe some here have the same thought, and maybe they don't, maybe it's just me, but I just figured I'll throw it out there.
To answer you, you'd have to buy me dinner and then, no. So to answer you is, I will explain though that there are certain things that might be operational enhancements such as the boat, but it's also to save lives. So, and you know that as well. And so with the new chief, he's looking at some of our deficiencies as a new chief, and he's doing, you know, like even with Ms. Henning here, it's kind of when you're new, it's wonderful because they do a situation analysis and go, okay, I'm seeing some gaps here and we need to do this. My recommendation, if you were going to lower it, and I'm not going to have that conversation now, but my recommendation would not be in the manner that you have, for the simple reason that we have deficits in our spending. And so what you'd be doing is pushing the, you know, kicking the ball down the road a little bit, and that ball increases your maintenance costs as well unnecessarily, creates, you know, when do I trade in my car? I trade in my car when I no longer have confidence that it's going to get me from A to B, and I keep my cars long. That's one of my mental states, or when I'm doing too many repairs for the amount of expenditure, right? That's why we replace cars or vehicles. You know, we can't afford to be stuck on the highway and geez, I got another $1,000 brake job. It seems to be every month. So that we start to say, we don't have mental confidence. It's 10 years, it ain't going to get any better. So they replace it. So having said that, with respect to reducing it to an amount, I'm happy to answer that only after providing a little bit more information, if you don't mind.
No, absolutely.
Okay. So the second, okay.
May I just speak for a minute? So, you know, and I think that, you know, like Mr. Barbeau and I had a bit of a discussion on this capital reserves and how it works in that whole smoothing process. And again, it's based on what you need over a 5 or 10 year period. So Ms. Craddock, who's very good at what she does, has been really working with all of our department heads to get to a place where we're planning for those capital investments 5 years down the road. So we know what needs to be done. We can, you know, maybe switch the priorities, but it's something that they've been working on as an organization to get to that point where it's planned ahead. It's not all of a sudden, oh, next year we need 4 million for this building. Oh, well, we didn't know that was coming up. So, you know, because I asked the same kind of questions, and, you know, the advice from staff was really, you know, if you start cutting the capital expenses, again, at some point it's going to catch up to you. So, you know, if we say, well, let's cut the truck, let's cut the pickup truck. Well, next year we'll have another asset that's at the end of its lifespan. Plus we'll have the asset that we really should have replaced this year. Now we have a double expenditure on the same type of thing a year from now. And instead of spreading it out and doing kind of a long-term management of those assets, we're doubling down on it, right?
Yeah.
And so this provides an opportunity for us to keep the levels steady. As far as what our investments. So does that kind of, I'm trying to put it into layman's terms, the way that I understood it.
So I have 6, that was number 7. Yeah.
Okay, so, you know, like that was kind of, the discussion is that, again, if we have $20 million worth of fleet in public works, then, and we know that the average lifespan is 10 years, we know that we need $2 million a year for fleet.
I might be dangerous, saying something dangerous here without the support of the staff here, but Mr. Remyard's you know, he likes to needle a lot, and he's not here now, but he's probably listening. He sent me a picture of a truck. I got to tell you, if you think we're driving fantastically new trucks, yeah, we have some okay trucks on the road, but some of the trucks that are due for replacement, they're pretty bad. And perhaps as the tour of DSAB's facility, perhaps in the future we can give you a tour of some of our assets and show you why we are replacing certain things, and you can get an understanding for next year in terms of, oh yeah, I saw that was, yeah, well, you know, and then we can show you that. So yeah, Madam Mayor, that's a perfect point. So it's a smoothing thing, and we're trying to get it to a level, you know, and councilors talk about tax increases and you know, and I understand that, and that's the world we live in, because I've got a bunch of newspapers here that basically show tax increases in the province of Ontario, and it always gets translated to percentages. But 1% of $100 is $1. 1% of $200 is $2. Depends on what you're starting from. So these percentages are even way worse than us, because we're one of the lowest tax communities in the province. And so our percentage, the dollar amount we're going for as 5.4 is 5.4 levy is really different on the impact to the taxpayer than it is on others. I'm just saying that. The other thing, Melanie, if you can now, and I don't even have a copy of what I developed. If you can share that, and I'll take them too, so I know what I'm talking about. And this is from Councillor Gagne's conversation with Ms. Hennig.
Thank you.
Councillor Gagne asked his chair, it would have been nice to, and yeah, I suppose, but like this is a different time of year, we're trying to get it done and whatever, so I apologize. But when you ask, I'm happy to give it. So what I got originally on the 13th of November, 5 days before, was 10.66%. So you would have had to have found $1 million to get it to around 5, right? And I'm going, whoa, let me have a look at that, because with all due respect, I have a better sense working with staff of how to cut things without affecting operations. And so I took it upon myself to do it. I could have let you do it and come to the same answer when you asked me after, twisting in the wind. So here's what happened from 2.121. The general reserve, as I indicated to you, Ms. Craddock on the original amount had dropped it to 900,000. I said, bring it back. Council education, she increased it by, I think, 15%. Well, you have it in there. I decreased that by 5. I had to go find something. Everybody's got to pay. Vehicle expense, I looked at the historicals, the 5-year averages, even though we're reducing the amount in their reserves, I reduced their vehicle expense by 25. I reduced overall the reserve by 435 because they were asking 600 and change increase between fleet and whatever. So between the two, I reduced it by 435. Now they got back because I just split them in half, and they said, if you're going to do that, I would prefer that we put it into the fleet because we really need it for the fleet, or we can't carry out with our plan. And I'll worry about the public works, or we'll worry about catching up with the infrastructure down the line. So that was a staff public works expert decision. Community services, I increased their revenue by 15 because council provided, and I didn't see it reflected, council provided fee service increases last year, and I didn't really see it. And so, yeah, we're playing fast and loose, and I'm saying you can find 15. Human resources, I reduced it by 33, and for the life of me, I don't know where. I just saw that in the thing. Hopefully we didn't do it wrong, or I didn't, or maybe I didn't, I don't know. Repairs and maintenance, I looked at their historical, and I reduced it by 125 too. Now, do they need it? Absolutely, they need it, but I have to get down to something, and I was looking at their historicals. Services and rents, same thing, I reduced it by 30. Planning and building, and this is where I even, this is nickel and diming now. I took out $3,000 worth of office supplies. I took $1,000 off of professional fees, and the non-tax, the assets that don't add up to a capital thing, I took out $6,000 there. Whether it's intelligent or not is, it's like I would suggest to you that they didn't put it there if they didn't need it, but we also come in with surpluses at 1.2. So I'm saying to staff, this is the year of tightening your belt. We're realigning resources, do more with less, or do the same with the less. Use your human resources to get the same things done as you would have gotten if we gave you raises. So that's, I'm just trying, and so I'm very popular at the staff level right now. Economic development, I reduced their advertising by 15. We have a couple rock stars in communication, and we are going to continue to try and find efficiencies in doing that. Professional fees, dropping it by 25. Fire and emergency, their services and rent, I dropped by 5. Vehicle expenses, I dropped by 25. Their vehicle expenses came in way under budget. This is where I'm going to flatter him. Because of his mechanical skills and his preventative maintenance skills, I'm sure he'll meet that budget. I'm 100% positive. we'll start holding our breath. And then I reduced his reserve because you can't get to where you want right away. And so, yeah, we're going to get, you might see an additional increase next year, a little bit like when we hire people, we only put half a year to try and get it down, but there you go. So that amounts to the total reduction of 5.77. Now, if you take the 10.66 and you subtract it by 5.77, you'll see that it doesn't add up to 5.31 because there are some things that were increased. When I noticed there's a few items that I found were cut, I think, too much. And I think that a CAO sounds like as the administrator, my philosophy in 2024 is use our human resources, make sure they're qualified, skilled, and performing to the expectation of your term plan. So I raised a lot of their cuts in training and education, and I brought it back to a level so they can make sure that they're going to be hitting the ground running in this decade, in this millennium. Because we have been cutting back, and I find that our staff have not been benefiting from professional development to the degree that similar organizations do. And so that's where there's some differences. But those were the differences. And there might be some big picture because I didn't have the benefit of Stratic today. But that's in general what I saw, Councillor Gagne, and for the rest of you. So that's how I got to 5.3. The other question I got, I don't have a slide on it, and I apologize, is what makes up the increase in HR? Here's my slide. This is how I work. We have last year increased and came to council with some increases to enhance service in a variety of different areas. But we didn't fund them completely. And that's how we were able to get the people in last year, but we kind of benefited from half salary and so forth. So bylaw, if council agrees, bylaw will be increased by about 45, and that would be a part-time bylaw in addition to covering some of the portions that were not fully funded with the permanent bylaw. That's right. So the 45 is the total.
Yep.
Yeah. IT, 50,000. There's a second IT person that's on board. I had and this is going to make the papers again, but there was an adjustment to my salary. I don't even know what that is. 45, the project manager? Yeah, project manager was increased. Their summer employment was 45,000. We have part-time, and which is an enhancement this year, 2 part-timers in Public Works for 30. There's an enhancement to salaries due to the restructuring of about 30. There's also, and you were presented that in your material changes, 130,000 that was presented to you for going 24/7 in community services. And then there's a collective agreement, which you say is 2.75, but it's actually slightly more because fire got more. So there's more to it than that. And then there's some slight benefit calculation enhancement as well. And so all of those add up to the 870.
So I'll just recap that. So part of the increase of the $817,000 for this year is in order to get our number lower last year, when we talked about the addition of the IT specialist, the bylaw officer, and the project manager, staff drew back those numbers to half a year in last year's budget. So this year, they have to be budgeted for a full year's salary. So that makes up a portion of that. And then the other things that Mr. Barbeau stated. But last year, we only budgeted half a year for each of those 3 positions that were added. And therefore, just the starting point of this year takes those 3 positions to the full-time, the 12 months of salary. So that's one of the pieces.
And the only changes that I brought to you a few weeks back, we're actually just flipping what's called FTEs, full-time equivalents. So there was a position here, we're not filling that one, we're changing it, and there's now going to be a planner. There's a project manager, there's not going to be a project manager. We're going to do that and build that into cost, and we're going to have a manager of community development. Those things are not adding bodies. There are 3 part-time bodies, 1 bylaw, 2 public works. And let me give you the sales pitch for public works. I can give you sales pitches when I like to tell you I'm selling you. I'm glad you're all sitting close to each other, but COVID is here, and COVID is affecting, we had 4 or 5 people off yesterday, I believe, workers for public works. And so that gets a little bit dicey when we start getting epidemics of people that are sick and calling in sick. Thankfully, there was no snowstorms. That was 2 days ago. Yesterday, I think they had a better crew. So these part-timers are people that could be called on an ad hoc basis to fill the gap for those things, to make sure we can cover runs. And that's pure and simple. They're just basically strolling, and then they can go cover a run if we run into problems. And I believe that we're very much lean right now.
So the additions to the staffing complement that are being proposed this year, that increase the headcount, are 2 part-time public works employee and 1 part-time bylaw officer.
That's right.
And the 2 part-time public works, are you kind of estimating them at 0.5, or do you think that they'll be
All I know is
lower than? I get it's hard to judge, right?
all I know is there's
They're not
30,000 there. They're
Okay.
worth 30, yeah. Total, not each, just 15 each. So that's the HR explanation.
Okay, any questions on the HR portion of the budget?
Now, moving on, I shared this with Madam Mayor this morning too, just so that you know, these are budget notes, so that Elisa gave me the fact that we know we're bringing a ton of stuff to you over the next time, based on questions from all of you. And there's the, do we need process for community groups to bring projects to council for consideration? So we want to standardize when people like pickleball or cricket, I don't know what that means, but different things. So these are policies we want to do and standardize that. Policy for recovering from user groups or from recovering from private roads. These things are coming back. The single rink or double rink for Cache Bay, they got that. So these are things that we're going to be looking at. Sidewalks, do we want to basically now reinstitute a benchmark where of your 3 million, let's say, we're going to dedicate $75,000 of that 3 million every year for sidewalks only. These are council discussions that we're going to bring back. They're going to constrain staff if they need more money here or whatever, but that'll be a report that comes back to staff or to council. Do we want a policy to reallocate membership fees at the fitness center for equipment replacement? I'm looking at you because I think you brought that up. Policy on proceeds from land disposition. I can't comment about the fact that the Cache Bay Center, once you see your facilities assessment, comes out at around 700,000, which is probably beneficial to the fact that we have 700,000 in the bank from the sale of something. I wouldn't want to basically start dedicating things that way, but we're going to have a policy for basically whatever we sell goes into a certain thing, and then we start coming to council with the money we have and looking at what you want to do. Okay, so that's good for you and for everybody. Things that are sort of follow-ups, maybe, she says. This was to me, and she likes to joke. What roads were done under the manhole patching process and what roads are in 2024, so that Ms. Henning will come back with specifics for the manhole stuff in Cache Bay. I think that was yours.
I did get the 2 for that were done this year.
Yeah, Coastal Road and paved shoulders or sidewalks, naming of plow trucks.
Fire trucks.
These are big budget items. and then there's secret stuff that I won't share with you in terms of if you want to get things down. But I will basically, she's giving me some options that she would basically say, you got to do something. There's some stuff there, but I don't necessarily recommend some of them. I recommend others more loosely. So when you get to that final tax thing, I'm aware of the options that she's giving me, and we'll look at where you want to go. So there was that. My final question or comment was from Madam Mayor, and I just want to kind of highlight, and because Misery likes company. The mayor asked just this morning, and I had about 4 or 5 minutes to myself at 3. Guelph's property tax hike, 8.52%. Thunder Bay, 6%. Tecumseh, which is just outside of Windsor, 5.55. Oakville, 4.28. And that's actually a lower tier. So Oakville is a lower tier, 4.28. They haven't gotten the Peel Region one. Orangeville, again, Dufferin County alone, not the lower tier, 4%. So then if you add the lower tier, what's that going to be? Greater Sudbury is around 6.5%. Alexandra, 10.6%. 7.24% in Kenora. And this one was LaSalle, 5.7%. Now there are some, I'm not going to say, I gave you that to pad my argument, where there's a bunch of assessment growth and there's a bunch of construction and where Ontario's growing, really, really fast in the GTA and other areas. Yeah, their tax increases are lower because they benefit from massive construction assessment. So, we had $300,000, which is 1.5%. They probably get 4 to 5 to 6 to 8% buffers by new construction alone, right? And they also have, because they don't have a problem putting development charges, because it doesn't matter to the developer because the market will bear it anyway. Where we put development charges here and we lose our competitive edge against North Bay, Sudbury. So, Northern Ontario, from a financial constraint perspective, is a way different animal. But even as you can see in that general area, everywhere is being hit. So that's it for me.
I'll just add to that. We are single tier, and in the rate increase that we see, it includes what would be the services provided by an upper tier. Or some of the services provided by an upper tier, which would be the social services and the health board, and then so those are kind of wrapped in. We are taxing for all services, and then of course our environmental budget and our water and sewer done separately and are paid by users, right? So questions on the last portion of our discussion here, and then we'll move in kind of section by section.
So if I want to segue to Councillor St. Louis, if you're asking an administrator who has to take abuse from the people up and down the road here, what we should have, we should increase it by about
10%.
$1 million. That's as an administrator. But I was already thinking as an administrator who reports to politicians and knowing what Walmart prices are. And so, I brought it down to 5.3 and I didn't have 5.3 in mind. I just looked at what I can do and it came up to 5.3. Now, if you want to get it lower than that, my recommendation, thinking as what might be acceptable to you, but whatever money you reduce, you got to go find next year. So if you want to do it this year and you want to reduce it, I wouldn't recommend going lower than about 4.8, which would be 100,000. If you want to go lower than that, you can, but you're pleasing the taxpayer. And by the way, that's about $10 on the average tax bill. You're saving $10 on the average, probably a little less because I didn't factor in the fact that industrial and commercial. So, if that's on average, what you'd be saving $7 or $8 per person. If you want to save more, then you really want to erode what we're doing here. And then you know, it sounds colorful or extreme, but it's not. It would be, okay, let's just fold up now and go back to strat planning and decide what you want to do and what you don't want to do, because that we will be at that stage. If you want to do less with what you have, then I have to come and see what services you don't want to have. And I know there's no better way, but we're all facing inflation. People face inflation. It's difficult on them, but so are corporations. We're facing inflation. We're facing gas prices. We're facing all of the same things that other people do. So unless you want to cut and look at your term plan, then that's where we're going.
Councillor Rivard?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The one thing I like that you mentioned was go find next year. So I'm still trying to wrap my head. I don't like thinking about the past, but I'm still trying to wrap my head around just 2 years ago, there was only a 1% increase in a time when inflation was crazy and everything. And now we're seeing it, everything's going up. So I think we're still paying for that, not only next year, but it could be a couple of years. So that's why something like, in order to get to a healthy level, maybe that 5.3 is what's needed. Maybe it would actually probably even be more. But I don't really believe in lowering it too much. But on what Councillor St. Louis mentioned, and I think is what you're getting at, is are we helping get to a healthy level, or are we just constantly adding as well to our reserves? And when you mentioned the boat and the extra vehicle for community services, like I guess those are the type of discussions I'd like to see. Is
for a replacement.
No, it's for building parole officers.
Yeah,
building
so
inspectors.
it really is a change, a conversion of paying somebody for expenses and having our own vehicle so that we can maintain it. And, you know, and then Councillor Pellerin asked me, and I did an analysis, but I'll give it to you at a council meeting, about the difference in changes in operation. We have IT people here we didn't have when I first started. But what we did is we were paying a lot of money to people in Sudbury to come here and fix their computers, and we'd be waiting without being able to do any work until they came and fix it. So we replaced $100,000 in IT contract, and we hired Kevin Yarosh, right? And so a lot of what we've changed, we haven't really enhanced. The service we offer is the service we offer. It's just the method. So the same thing with the vehicle. You know, we hired a bylaw enforcement person. We had the benefit in the first bylaw enforcement people of using old police cars that we inherited when they left. But after that, they died because they were old. And now we have a bylaw enforcement vehicle. So one of our our building officials, you know, and they're both using vehicles and they're paying a lot of money. And so that's a conversion of one to the other.
Yeah, and those are kind of the conversations that, and the explanations that I want to hear, right?
Yeah.
Is, are we becoming more sustainable by adding these, you know, a bylaw officer car or the boat? And so maybe these numbers are what we have to look at and not try and lower too much, because then, like, especially with that 1%, we'll just keep adding and it'll just kind of get out of hand. So maybe this is a way to get to a more sustainable level.
Yeah, and I think with that vehicle, because we're paying vehicle expenses and mileage to the building official, although it's a capital expense, which is a lump sum up front, what we pay out on an annual basis on the operational side of building and planning will change to offset, right? And it's also
Right. And as the director mentioned, I mean, we all know, we all buy our own vehicles, right? And 35,000, that's tax in everything like that. We're not buying a BMW. So I paid mine used. I paid 35 for it. So yeah, so that's the answer there. But to speak to while I'm colorful, Mr. Rivard's point, and it's no offense. I know you're just trying to cut to the edges, but I've been asked to get out of Dodge, and you know, and we just don't want to come to meetings all the time. So you want 2%? Okay, I'll give you 2%, and I'll find you 2%. And it's smart. And we've been doing that and doing that and doing that. And I kept on saying, oh, yeah, but I don't have any more rabbits. I just don't have any more. It's just, and as you can see in the province, nobody else does either. So, you know, if you're reducing your OMPF, if they decide to give us an extra $500,000, when we were doing these 1 or 2%, OMPF was also rising. Now, the last 5-6 years, it's going down. OMPF is the government grant, the stable one. And so when that goes down, then it puts pressure on your taxpayers to make up the difference. And so that's about 1%, not just a reduction, but if they would have kept up with the inflation on that, it's about 1.5 there too. So all of these things put pressure on government. And so that's where the province is downloading to us. But if you want me to get it under 5, I can recommend it. And you can decide whether you think it's intelligent or not. That's not up to me.
Councillor Gagné?
Yeah. One thing, Monsieur Barbeau, you presented last year is that 5.3%, what is that the cost for a average household in West Nipissing? The increase, because I
Okay.
think last year was $50, I think, per
Yeah.
year. I think, is that something that you have, and if not, can you maybe?
Did I bring I didn't bring I have, and Elisa laughs at me because I don't use a computer, I use a calculator, so I use.
Sometimes people think an increase of 5% is really high, but when you bring it down to actually how much is it gonna cost you over the span of a full year, $50, it's not even $5 a month there, so. So if we want to keep this town moving forward and keep it beautiful and not too rough. Because I went to Sudbury last night, so it's rough. It's still rough.
Yeah, on average, the 5% is about $100
Bucks increase.
per household.
Per household.
But that, it's probably less because I'm only taking households on that, and so I didn't factor in your commercial or industrial.
Okay.
So I'm just saying about 7,500 households divided by.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Tissy?
Yes, through Madam Mayor, like Councillor Gagné said, I think your example was like $1,000 was maybe 40 or 60, like $40. Like for $1,000 of taxes, you gave the amount what it came up to. So
Right.
that was
Yeah.
a more accurate
Right.
base, so yeah.
Yeah, so I don't have it here, but certainly I can present it at a council meeting. Because this is like, it's a magic pot. It's called Opta. And you throw in the numbers into Opta and there's rates and ratios as you know, and there's things that you do. And then it spits out what the average rate increase, and then it'll say, this many households will actually see a decrease at that amount. Lakefront households might pay $200-300 more a year and whatever. So it's very hard to give you a hard average. Typically, the higher end homes bear a bigger brunt. And then the people who have more difficulty paying, typically the way it shakes out on Opta is they end up paying a lot less. But I don't have that. Elisa would have to throw it in with our tax collector, throw it in, and I can give you even by, I know we can do an addendum, but I can give you that even Tuesday by throwing a number into Opta.
Thank you.
Okay, what I'd like to do next is maybe just go section by section. If there's any specific questions on, we'll go through general government, public works. I know the chairs had discussions. If you don't mind, I'll continue to chair, but if the chairs want to chair some of those questions, sorry?
I don't know, because I've asked the general questions. I thought that that's what we had already done, so. If you have questions of anything on any line, that's why, feel free to ask them.
Okay.
It might be just better. Otherwise, it may take a long time, Madam Mayor, and if there's not a lot, then we'll just, I don't want to revisit things.
Well, I mean, I'm of the mind, I'd still like to get it down a little. I think there's some specific discussions that I've had, or specific thoughts that I've had on ways we can, maybe try to decrease a little bit. And I'm assuming that other councillors and their discussions with their chairs may have other things that have come up too. I'm not too sure, but if you want me to start, you and I spoke today in regards to the contribution to reserve for the chateau, and whether that would be an opportunity for us to save a little given the stall in the development at this point. If you'd like to speak to that a little bit.
That would be, you take the wind right out of my sails. that would be where I would reduce. I would recommend that without affecting any real expenditure levels that affect your residents.
The other items that we looked at, we looked a little bit at the special projects through community services. And we do have the Cano funding request there. But that request hasn't been approved at council yet. So I'm not necessarily saying we should reduce the special projects budget in itself, but I do have concerns that we're identifying a specific funding that we haven't actually had before council at this point.
You're right. So a little bit like, the special projects for community services and economic development are treated differently, in my opinion, than recommendations by expert staff on what to do in terms of infrastructure. That the special projects, as I had a conversation with Madam Mayor, is entirely a decision that council wants to take, whether you want to undertake those special projects or not. What the budget exercise does, though, is discusses the expenditure level. And so when I asked staff to come back, given this expenditure level, what do you recommend? I also asked Mr. Poullain, what would be the special projects that you would have? And he put them out there. But that doesn't necessarily mean you have to do that. You can choose to do something else. My caution to the mayor this morning was that if you reduce from 125 to 100, let's say, and take out Cano, just as an example, and I'm not suggesting you do or you don't, I don't have any opinion on that, and you drop it to 100. Now, what you have to spend on special projects in general is 100. So next year, when you have all kinds of interesting projects and you want to get it to 200, you don't have 125 anymore. You have 100. So my recommendation was keep it at 125, come back to council and reconfirm what projects we want to do at that expenditure level and decide what you want to do. You may want to do not one of what Mr. Poullain suggested. You may have a bunch of others, but that would be a council discussion.
I'll just stay on the economic development topic. Councillor St. Louis?
Okay, so just to get that right, so if we decide that we leave it at the 125,
But you don't do Cano, you have 25.
you don't do Cano or pickleball or whatever, the cricket or whatever, we leave it at 125, we're not committed to Cano or anything like that.
No,
Okay.
no, you're not buying any of the projects per se. The only ones I would ask you to buy real fast are the ones that are the reasons why you want to budget earlier is Miss Hanning's and Steph's infrastructure stuff to get the best price. But the community development and ECDEV projects, that's entirely a council and perhaps even the committees that they work with would be my recommendation as well, to go back to committees and say, listen, we have 125, what do you want to do with it?
Okay, and then on the community services capital, again, so it's the same kind of thing. Pickleball there at 50. I mean, if we approve this budget as it appears, are we saying, yes, we want to do that? Or we're just putting that money into the community services infrastructure?
Yeah.
And when we make a decision at council specifically to that, I mean, it's in this document, but it doesn't commit us necessarily to that project or that level.
No.
Okay.
So the capital book, you can pull out, I would recommend that anything like that you pull out, we obviously would not go forward in tender. Those that you say, I'm okay with the other ones, that we go forward in tender. But the ones that you say, listen, I'd like to have more discussion about pickleball in your special projects. I'd like to have a discussion about all the projects and not just what's recommended by staff. I'd like to have a good, fruitful discussion amongst council and our committees. I'd recommend to you, Madam Mayor, that that's more prudent approach than, yeah. So just to give you a comfort level, no. Whatever council decides tonight, say, no, don't do that. If you want to reduce it by 45, that's fine. But my recommendation would be you're now going to have to catch up the 45 or the 50 next year.
Mhm.
But
When
if
you're
you don't have to spend it,
capital.
no. If you tell us don't go out with pickleball, and I'd recommend that we're not, because there's so many unknowns with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. we'll just keep on. Back to the special projects budget for community service, well, this time for economic development. The other item that we had a discussion about is the BDO zone designation. So on the special projects budget, it does show as 112,000. Mr. Poulin has recently had word that there is a $55,000 funding that we can approve for. So even though it looks like $112,000 expense, we're also getting a revenue back in at 55. So it'd actually be at 57. But that has not gone back through. This was a project that was started under the last council and the last Economic Development Advisory Committee. And it hasn't gone back through the Economic Development Advisory Committee because we only just received the funding a week ago or 10 days ago. You know, I don't know that we're quite sure yet that that's going to be a good investment or whether it's a worthwhile investment. And so I don't know what to say about that. Mr. Poulin, did you have anything to add on that?
Yeah, we have a bit of work to do. That application went to NRCan federal agency back in 2022. Took them a year to approve the grant, and the grant is conditional that we negotiate a contract with a consultant that will do the work on our behalf. We had a call with some NRCan program reps this week, and they advised us that we have 60 days to sign their agreement to confirm that we're proceeding with the project. So there's a bit of work that we'd like to do from a staff perspective is gain a better understanding of what the benefits could be to our community and to our businesses, and have that discussion probably at the advisory committee level, and let the advisory committee advise council on whether they feel we should be proceeding with this project or not. And if council opts to not accept the funding, then the project goes away and there's a $55,000 saving that could be had. If we decide to go forward, then there's more work to do, because we don't know if the consultant that provided us with an estimate back in 2022, if they'll hold their price. And we did ask the question to the NRCan rep, if the price has gone up, will the funding agency provide more funding to match the 50% dollars? And it's absolutely not. So there's a lot more work, and we would need to come back to council with more information.
Just for council's benefit, I'm just giving you the financial advice. I wouldn't treat that one in the same manner as I would be treating the 125 for community that I recommend keeping. If you actually take that project out, my view is that you'd be saving 55,000 on your budget. Because I think that the ECDev floats with, it's called priority projects. And then once they have projects identified, they come to you and there's a return because you see what's going to happen. And you say, yeah, we'll fund that. So they're very much specific projects that that's undertaken. And so that 172 has a very specific project. If it's not there, I'd suggest that you'd be saving 55. 57, you're right, yeah.
So that was just that, as far as I'm concerned, as a council decision, that could be on the block. I know it sounds like we're nickel and diming right now at 57 here and, 25 there, but, if the desire of council is to get it down a little, those are some of the places that I kind of look at those opportunities to reduce. I'm just trying to see if I have any other notes here. Does anybody else have any comments on any sections or specific items?
Just on that, Madam Mayor, so process-wise, if you assume that you have an agreement in principle on expenditure levels, and even if you accept that expenditure level and you make a change prior to setting the tax rate, which is probably going to take another 3 months, you could do that budget amendment and reduce it further. So let's say you accept 5.31, it would go down to 5.5 or something like that. It'd be it's about 25.25 of a point. So that one there could be a flat out reduction on your taxes.
Mm-hmm. Questions? Councillor St. Louis.
More of a question for Mr. Pineda. So however, we just don't know about this project or whatnot, if it could be a benefit to our municipality yet, right? Is that what we were saying? Because when you first looked into it in the past, it was in the hopes that it would be a benefit to the municipality. So I'm just thinking, well, yeah, we might be saving 57,000. However, are we gonna lose in the long run, right? So I think the way you're putting it, Mr. Barbeau, I'd rather us wait. And if they come back to Mr. Poulain and say, hey, hold on here, here's what, and they do their research, and it's definitely a benefit to our municipality, and it's bringing us $200,000 a year moving forward, well, I think we're probably benefiting as opposed to cutting to 57, or knocking off the 57 right now, right? So if the possibility is there to look into it more in 3 months from now, when we do set it, I think so. And I mean, at the end of the day, I think when you do your research, that's what we're gonna need to know, if it's definitely valuable for us or not.
Well, we've got a 60-day window to sign an agreement with the funding agency, so I think if it's council's wish to get more detail on that and the possible benefit or not to the community, then we would have to do that in short order. We couldn't wait 3 months, so
Well, for budget purposes, I would want you to reach out and get it to the second meeting of December if you can.
Yep, we can try, yeah.
Anybody else have any questions or comments? Great, Councillor Watt.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, I strongly agree with give it time and let staff do what they can do and give us some more information on that topic before we do anything. Just in case there is a great benefit to the municipality.
Any other questions, as the Madam Mayor was saying, on any part of any department that you need information?
So I guess I'd just like to see where we are as far as comfort level on the budget that's been presented. Who's comfortable where we are? Who would like staff to go back and some further changes to get us down? Who's comfortable where we are at a 5.3? Councillor Tessier, 2, 3, 4. My personal opinion, because that's a kind of a tie, is I would like to see it with the 100, my opinion, with the 100 off of the Chateau Reserve, because at this point, there's no immediate plan to redevelop that property. And so we're putting money in a bank account for a specific project, and $100,000 is half a point. So, that $100,000 would get us down below the 5. It doesn't affect operations.
4.8.
What's that?
4.8.
Oh, what did I said 4.5?
No, you said just under the
Under
5.
five,
So
so I had
it's 4.8.
Doesn't affect our operations. It doesn't affect the operations of our municipality at all, and it doesn't even really have an immediate effect on the Chateau. The only thing is that if by some miracle the provincial government came with a check for $100 million to redevelop the property, we'd be $100,000 short, in which case we could go into the reserve. But it's to me, we're kind of tucking that money away for something that's very uncertain at this point. And so I saw 4 that are comfortable at 5.3, which means that there's 4 that are not comfortable at 5.3. So that's one option that would help us to get to a number that is a little bit more palatable for a greater number of people. Councillor Lavar?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, I forgot about that Chateau 100,000. But now I'd be wondering if we were comfortable with the 5.3 to take that 100 and lower our dependence on general reserve by another 100,000. So that next year it's slightly less as well, right?
Yeah.
So you stick with the 5.3, but next year we'll be in a stronger position to limit another large increase. And
Yeah.
that's an option as well.
Okay. That's actually
So
nice
that we
idea.
keep
We don't
working
get the
down.
300, but did you hear that, Mr. Barber?
No, what was that?
Councillor Rivard's contribution was if we're comfortable at the 5.3 and we're happy with putting the $100,000 less towards the Chateau Reserve, that 100,000 could actually go to lowering the dependence on the reserve, so it could actually go in our reserve. So we have people who are comfortable at the 5.3. There are those of us who wanted to, really wanted to focus on lessening the dependence on the reserve. So, that's an option too. There's the option for.
Yeah, if I might suggest, Madam Mayor, because your suggestion was great, you might even
It's
get.
actually Councillor Rivard.
Yeah, so it's 5.3 with that.
Yeah.
So I would ask, is everybody, and I would concur with the mayor that it would not be a bad idea to remove that 100,000. And then if you want to reduce the budget, you can do it, or if you want to keep the budget at 5.3, then that could be a vote. But so then the next part is, so the question is everybody in favor of taking the 100 out of the Eau Chateau, given what I just said? And if that's a yes, then it's, do you like 5.3 and doing what Councillor Rivard said, or 4.8 and reducing the tax to a Walmart price?
So who would be comfortable in taking the $100,000 off of the reserve contribution towards the Chateau? 1, 2, 3, 6. Okay, thank you. Okay, and then, so the next question is, with that extra $100,000, who would be in favor of reducing the tax rate, is that right, to 4.8?
The levy increase, yeah.
Or do you want me to phrase it the other way?
No.
Sorry. So who would be in favor of using that to reduce the tax rate? So take the $100,000, put it straight on what we have, same contribution from reserve, but the increase goes down to 4.8. Who's in favor of that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
And you.
And me.
So the question then, Madam Mayor, is 4.8 acceptable to council?
Is 4.8 acceptable to,
That's a question.
do you have a question, Councillor
Yes.
St. Louis?
So obviously a lot more satisfied than,
Mhm.
with the 4.8. Am I comfortable with it? Yes. What I'm not comfortable with is, unfortunately, I know there's maybe other little things that we could bring it down without knowing what they were. So for me, if we're able to get it a little lower to the 4.6, so be it, but.
Well, the other thing you have is 55 or 57, which would be 25, which is a 50.
Oh, it was from the stuff before.
Right?
Oh, okay.
So if you had 4.8 with that, that would be another, you'd be down to about 4.55. But I'll tell you, and you're right, politically, I'm not comfortable because we're used to seeing percentages and we're used to seeing 3 and 2.5s and whatever. I'm not comfortable with it either, but every time you're changing that, even a logical decision like that, next year you're going to be regardless of where you're assigning it to, you're $100,000 less next year by doing that. But I do agree, and I shared with the mayor that my perspective was something shy of 5 would be, compromises when two people, two sides don't get what they want, to the benefit. And I would suggest that for that level is fiscally prudent. Going too much more, then you're just finding more money. No matter where you assign it, Councillor St. Louis, you're going to have to go find it next year. So right now with 4.8, you'd be looking at just slightly under $1 million more money that you don't have to go get next year, and that hopefully we can redistribute appropriately and get the reserves down. So.
Councillor Resto?
I guess if we're in around that range, I'm not a big percentage guy, but if we can get it to 4 or 5, 4, 8, that's fine. But just something to keep in mind as well, if I'm understanding things right here, if we're looking at this increase this year, that's raising our floor for next year, right? So
that's what I'm saying, raising the floor by $1 million.
Right. So next year, we might not necessarily have these same increases again. We may or we may not, based on where those floors are going to.
It's just a soft speaker and I deaf. So next year we won't have the same what?
I said next year we might not have the same increases to some of the positions because we're lifting that floor up.
Yeah, so, yeah, the HR part of it absolutely won't be an impact next year.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think that's something that we talked about last year and you know, we're not going year by year. We're looking at the
No.
long term here and how we getting things up to where we want them to.
No, so 600, more or less, I'm averaging out for theoretical purposes, but 600 of your $890,000 raise was the incremental stuff. The rest was just budget increase. So next year, in theory, there'll be a $600,000 buffer that you're going to have as well, because you're not going to be increasing at 900. You're going to be or 900,000. You'll be increasing it by about 300. That's the point that Councillor Stool is making.
Right.
I missed it. Thank you.
With my light voice, sorry. The other thing too is, I don't know if it's been shared, but we had considerable savings from the health unit levy as well.
Yeah, that's a case of beer and a bag of Doritos, but thanks. No, so the health unit was projected at 4, and I did rough math with my calculator. And Mr. Restool fought, and he's got bruises and scars, and it's down to 3% instead of 4, which amounts to a massive savings of just about 4,000. 4,100. Yeah. But
Every
it is
bit
that
counts,
safe.
right?
It is that safe.
And, you know, and that's another point too, is that we don't know, where the DSAB apportionment is going to come in, like what their raise is going to be. Hopefully staff has overestimated, the need of DSAB. And they too will come in a little lower than what's been estimated, and that could, you know, that could have a slight change, and I don't think we're gonna have any sense of that till.
Even a lowered voice.
Yeah, I don't. So, you know, we do still have that, questions, comments, Councillor Pellegrini?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. A lot of people asking and suggesting that we can be more efficient. Some example that came up, for all the pickups we got to go cut the lawns and all this. We use like the little parking lot behind McDonald's, there's 3-4 pickups there. And then in the summertime, they used a lot more than the winter, right? I assume.
Well, there's less travel because we're not in River Valley field cutting lawn so there's less travel, obviously, but we also need staff to get out to various locations to remove snow, walkways, all that stuff. So our maintenance staff report to work, unless they live close to the Vernon Arena and they're reporting to work that day at the arena, and there's a truck at the arena in Vernon that they can jump in. Like, our maintenance staff don't use their own vehicles. They have to, we need to provide vehicles for them. Same goes for our foremans as well, right? We have one truck in community services that have a plow. There's a snow occurrence, our staff leave in the morning, use that truck and go do where we can with that plow. So as far as efficiency, I think we are efficient. We don't go on joyrides just to ride the trucks around town. When you see a municipal truck, it's because they're going to a destination to get the work done.
But I think a report on a usage analysis could happen. In fact, you know, Councillor Coshine and I were in a snowstorm somewhere out near French River. Oh yeah, North Manettville. And, you know, commenting on a building there where our facilities people go and provide information, deliver stuff and what have you. And then they're moving to fire halls and they're driving around in the wintertime too, because we have buildings all over. And so we have one person that's got a service call, you know, out in North Manettville. We'll have a person that'll have a service call out in Field. They'll go to Vernon, they'll go wherever. Here, they're back and forth all the time. So, you know, they do use them, but your point is it'd be really interesting, again, now that we're getting more sophisticated with this council and with the staff, to provide a vehicle usage report as to where they are, how they're deployed, so you can see that.
I was thinking too, like, let's say if you don't use them as much as in the winter time, which I don't think you are, you could do a share, let's say with water and sewer, or build them to go open the yard. I believe they got two trucks and plows,
Who does?
water and sewer.
Okay.
So do they really need those?
So water and sewer, I mean, there's a variety of different things that water and sewer do. But water and sewer by law have to drive around to probably, I don't know, a dozen, 20, 25 locations every day and test water. So those trucks, and then they go and service water main breaks. But we don't just test our water at the plant. We have to test them all over. And we have places where we go. So water and sewer take off the field. Water and sewer take off to Verner. And then they go to, and they test in 4, 5, 6 locations in Verner. They're testing in about 20 locations here, Cache Bay. They're lift stations. We have a lot of assets that need to be covered by them. And I would suggest the water and sewers assets are utilized.
Don't forget the hydrants.
Hey?
Don't forget the hydrants.
Hydro,
No,
or
hydrants.
hydrants. Okay, you're so self-serving.
But I think to Councillor Pedernet's point, maybe you're suggesting we go to a fleet service where anyone can sign in or out a vehicle at any time. Then you need the fleet to do that. But we're like our facilities and our vehicles are parked in strategic locations where staff are, and they need to be deployed from there. I work for the Ontario government. Some of us still do, and some of us did. They have fleets there, and MTO would control the fleet for all the ministries at the McEwen office, and you would sign in, sign out. But to do that, you need a larger volume of vehicle to ensure that if everyone needs a vehicle at that time, that there's a vehicle available for them. So I get what you're saying. If there's a way that we can share vehicle, we would, but on any given time, you could be called out to some type of emergency, and those vehicles need to be available for staff, for departmental staff, whenever they need them.
But I'm not defensive of the status quo. What the point that we're making is it's worth an analysis to see, whether we have the ability to consolidate given our usage. That's your point.
The analysis is gonna be,
For all
you
departments.
guys,
Yeah.
you won't need to hire
A new fleet manager?
A consultant.
Oh, a consultant?
yeah,
Yeah.
that's another.
Well, any consultant, just so you know, for the record, that we have been hired was out of that enhancement fund. So we're only offering consultants to do study because we have free money to do it. None of that's come off your taxes. So your fire master study, all of that stuff, your salary review, all of that stuff is off of what's called the
Modernization.
efficiency fund that was given here with no strings attached. There was about $650,000, if I recall, ish, and there's about 300,000 used. So when there's ideas where we want to be more efficient, we basically dip into that fund, we come to council, and there's no money involved. But we're not just studying for the sake of studying too. There's a lot of stuff that we need to do that is going to come back with some unpleasant data, such as the roads needs study. There's going to be building studies, building condition assessment studies. The fire master plan is going to give you some real food for thought, so.
When you look at the detail that's provided, like in something like the road study that we looked at last week, we don't have the staff resources to put that kind of time and energy, nor do we necessarily have the expertise for.
It's very specific.
It's a very specific kind of thing. But then when you look back at some of the studies that have been done, whether it's the housing study or the operational review, those do end up being very helpful to us when we're trying to be guided strategically in how to make improvements to the organization. And my understanding of this fund is it was specifically provided to municipalities to be able to provide that data, those studies. Like, this is not a fund that we're using that could be used for something else. It's very specific that was trying to encourage municipalities to really examine their operations to find efficiencies and find ways to modernize. And so, you know, it was a gift from the province. Like many of the gifts from the province, they have very specific strings attached to them on what they can be spent for. And, you know, like with that road study that was done last week, I think that those types of things are great tools, partly for us as council, but really for our professional staff who have the responsibility of managing you know, a 2,000 square kilometer municipality. So, you know, we kind of laugh at consultants, but at the same time, you know, they do provide some really valuable information and insight into what's going on, especially for a new council like us.
So Madam Mayor, the study was 100% covered
Yes.
by that grant?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
That make you feel good?
Better. It's still,
It's still tax money,
Yeah.
but it's, you know, it's provincial tax money, and
Yeah.
if we didn't get it, some other municipality would have, so.
Yeah. You know, it was interesting, but, you know, my twilight years, if I wax philosophically, you know, there's a lot of individuals that have very good practical ideas that they would have for efficiencies, and they're right, you're right. But then I might have a ton of practical ideas for efficiencies as well, but there are political constraints to doing that. Like there's a lot of buildings I would shut down, a lot of land I would sell. There's a lot of things that we're not using, but politically you're going to get some resistance in your various constituencies by doing that. So that's the, you know, municipalities are really interesting in that there's such a diverse need. There's some people who are really pro-homeless versus people who are pro-sports, pro-pickleball, and trying to meet those diverse needs. And then you say, okay, we're not using that enough, let's cut that. Woohoo. So it's, you know, when we get into efficiencies and redirecting our resources to where people actually want to use them in the future as opposed to the past, it's going to be really good for the future, but it's going to be a tough decision and tough discussions that council's going to have. Once you get those reports, it's going to be holy moly. That's my expression for it. Very difficult.
So just because we kind of got a little off track there, where we are at right now is we're at a proposed increase at 4.8. From what we have here, the only substantial change is $100,000 less into the Eau Chateau Reserve, and that going to lower the tax increase. So at 4.8%, I know we have a couple of people who would like to see that maybe nudge down a little further yet, but what I'd like to do is see who we have as takers at a 4.8% increase as presented here. So I'll see a show of hands. 1, 2, 3, 5, 6.
7.
7, sorry, thank you.
So then the caveat, thank you, Mayor and Council. So the caveat then is we're going to bring you some of the details on the grant, $55,000 fund. I don't know what it's called, biofuel or.
Yep.
And then there'll be some other initiatives and projects that council will pick from. So those things will need to happen fairly soon. And so you can probably expect to see that in either second week of December, but likely in January to discuss that. And it could have a revisit of you're probably going to get a resolution in January anyway at this stage, because we already have general government in that in there. And so I don't know that I want to do it before Christmas, but definitely in January. And then might be some further analysis based on the conversations you had here, Madam Mayor, and other things such as the Eau Chateau, or not the Eau Chateau, but the pickleball, the Cano and other things. I know Cano is coming and their request is 25, and we don't want to debate it right now, please. But they're also asking for a lot of free dates coming forward. And so they're taking up a lot of the available calendar of our facilities for free. And those things are going to be brought to council. Is that next Tuesday or?
No, the 19th.
The 19th. So you'll have that opportunity to discuss those things going forward and what you want to do with it.
So what we're doing here is an agreement in principle on what you've presented. The capital items that both Mr. Poulin, Ms. Henning want to start getting out, they can do that, but this is not a final budget approval. We are still waiting for our bills from DSAP and the Chateau, and
You may not be waiting for that. Those could be maybe your budget adjustments.
okay.
But you certainly are going to be waiting for a discussion with respect to what your Economic Development Committee says with respect to that fund, because that'll get you to 4.5.
Okay.
And I would not pass a tax rate knowing ahead of time that we don't need it.
So we would be looking at, like, when would you think that we would be bringing back that? Are we going to have an economic development meeting in December or shortly?
We'll attempt to have one before the December 19th council meeting.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, what I mentioned to Mr. Poulin is it'd be nice if council got it back for the 19th. Therefore, whatever committee work needs to happen, hopefully happens before that, Madam Mayor.
Yeah, and even though the 50,000 is in the community services facilities for pickleball, if it's not used there, I'm sure you have a list of facilities that require upgrades, repairs,
Correct.
and work, and that 50,000 would still be used.
Yes.
So it's not your recommendation to remove that from his capital budget?
Not any level of capital expenditure for the reasons we discussed ad nauseum.
Okay, thank you. Okay, what, Councilor Petrin?
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple things for Mr. Poulin, just for the arena burner. Did we get the dehumidifier?
The platform's been installed, the railing with the dehumidifier itself, I believe is on its way.
Okay.
It hasn't been installed yet, like the unit itself, but the legwork has been done prior to.
And we talked the other day about the two roofs for the entrance.
Canopies, yes.
Is that,
My understanding, they met yesterday on site or, where are we today? Thursday, Tuesday, I believe. My project manager met with Capital on site. I'll get an update and I'll let you know. I think they're still planning on pouring the slabs this year.
it's gotta be something done because it's a big liability.
Can we talk about that either after the, like, it doesn't have anything to do with the budget that we're talking about
Oh,
here right now, because it's already approved budget and these are projects underway, like it's not
Okay.
a regular meeting. I'm not trying to cut you off, but I think that we're actually ready to adjourn at this point. So if you want to ask those questions to after the past, so you have the information. Or we can bring it back for an update from Mr. Is that okay? Any other questions or comments on the budget before we take the confirmatory?
The only comment I'd make, Madam Mayor, is thanks to council for allowing us to present on the Saturday, and I thought it was very efficient, and I thank you for being patient. There were a lot of stumbling blocks that we had on our end, given the fact that it's a new cycle for us, and so, you know, what we will be proposing as well is a policy on budget process, and that'll be coming in January or February, so we can standardize what we want to do. But I want to take the time to thank the heads here, Ms. Craddock, very much so, especially all of the managers that work for these folks that put this together 2-3 months ago, leading up to today. And then, you know, I think that going forward, it's looking really good. And so I just wanted to personally, on behalf of myself, express thanks to Steph, Liz, Frank, and Elisa, and Sean, and all of those folks. And then the other one's garbage and sewer and water. That'll be done at a committee meeting, because they're not that long to do. And so we'll expect that the managers will be working with their chairs and bringing things forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our appreciation to staff, of course. I think we opened our budget deliberations with thanking you for changing the process and the extra work involved in that. So I do appreciate it. And I think it's a good practice. I think as far as running an efficient municipality, having budget done at this time is going to be a positive thing.
It's moved by Councillor St. Louis and seconded by Councillor Ristoul. Be it resolved that bylaw number 2023-95, being a bylaw of the West Nipissing Municipality to confirm its proceedings of council at its budget meeting held on November the 30th, 2023, shall come into force and take effect on the date it is passed.
All in favor? Carried.
It is moved by Councillor Ristoul and seconded by Councillor Kushein. Be it resolved that the budget meeting of council held on November the 30th be adjourned.
Okay, all in favor? Carried.